What is the value of doing philosophy in obtaining a broad perspective in life? Okay, so the question is, why do we philosophize? Okay, so what do you think? Why do we philosophize? So we all have the potential to philosophize, since we have the tendency to wonder and doubt, right? So uh, a philosopher is a good communicator who can clearly and adequately present his or her ideas. Okay, so doing philosophy can be applied in a day-to-day activities and life perspectives. Okay, because what it involves an evaluative process. Doing philosophy allows a person to make better decisions and act accordingly to situations with the help of various philosophical skills, right? So, on life perspectives, philosophy enables reflective thinking, which greatly influences a person's view of life, challenges, and what? Relationships. So, in doing philosophy, guys, a holistic perspective on the subject is always required. Why? Because failure to do so, or only what? Using a partial point of view, may lead to illogical or incorrect conclusions. Okay? All right. Yeah. So, doing a philosophical reflection on a situation from holistic perspective. So, what do we mean by philosophical reflection? So, when we say philosophical reflection, it is the process by which a person undergoes a reflective state or evaluates his or her experiences first before making any related action. So, the use of philosophical reflection is important as it enables thought to be looked into using a deeper holistic perspective. Yeah. So in effect, actions are directed towards greater sources of wisdom and truth. What do we mean by human self-reflection? So it is the capacity of humans to exercise introspection. Yeah. So when we say introspection, you are communicating to yourself, you are talking to yourself, right? Okay, you are having what? A solitude, di ba? And a reflection of the things that you have done before. Okay, that is introspection. So again, when we say human self-reflection, is the capacity of humans to exercise introspection and to attempt to learn more about their fundamental nature and essence. Okay? All right. Now, what are the examples of activities that from a deliberate reflection? What are those? Of course, learning from mistakes and not repeating them again. Okay, that is one of the examples of activities. If you're doing self-reflection, you are learning from your mistakes. Of course, when you commit mistakes, you ought not to do it again. Di ba? You should not repeat it again. Huwag mo nang kuhan, ulitin. Di ba? Redundant actually, not repeating them again. Repeating na nga, again pa. Di ba? Okay. Alright. Another example, evaluating and knowing the best choice from a set of options. Ayan, typo error na naman, di ko naayos. Again, evaluating and knowing the best choice from a set of options. So that will help. So self-reflection will help for you to be able to evaluate and know the best choice, especially when you are under pressure, right? In making any decision. In the process, one can learn more about himself or herself, including personal beliefs, ideals, or values. Another one is gaining a holistic point of view first before making any conclusion. So, philosophical reflection will help you gain a holistic point of view or holistic perspective before uh, making any conclusion, because sometimes, di ba, we don't see both sides of situations. Yeah, you don't consider the whole aspect. You're not looking at all aspects of the situation at all angles, right? That's why you have a wrong conclusion. So it's very important for us to what? To gain a holistic perspective, just like what we have discussed earlier. Okay. So what are the three levels of philosophical inquiries? Okay. So the first level is common sense, of course, and I believe that we have common sense. Everyone has common sense. So a basic ability to perceive and understand and judge things that are shared by nearly all people without need for debate. Diba? Sometimes we don't need to debate. Diba? If you are able to perceive and understand and judge things that are shared by nearly all people. Okay. Of course, the next level is scientific. Okay, so based on or characterized by the methods and principles of science, right? So in science and principles of science, before making any conclusions, okay, you have to what? Make observations and identify the problem first, right? Then after that, you gather preliminary data. Then of course, you have to formulate hypothesis. Okay, you can actually apply that in the. We can actually apply that in our real world, in any real life situation. Okay, you have to formulate hypothesis, then you have to test the hypothesis. So when we say hypothesis, guys, okay, it's not only a term for science. It is what? Genuine guess. Okay, you have to test your guess, of course. Mas lalo pagka hindi genuine yung guess mo, you know, tapos jump ka ng jump into conclusion, right? You're making any conclusions. But of course, you have to test your hypothesis first. You have to prove that your hypothesis is correct. Yeah? Then after that, of course, you can make what? You can make conclusion. You can jump into conclusion. Okay? After testing the hypothesis. Yeah? But of course, before jumping into conclusion, make sure that you have analyzed the data kung sa science. Diba? You have to analyze the data, the information that you have gathered. Okay? Okay. So, hanggang doon lang muna. Masyado nang lumalawak ang ating topic. Alright. So, the highest level, of course, is the philosophical. So, when we say philosophical, relating or devoted to the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence. That is philosophical. Okay? And by the way, guys, just like I said earlier, that philosophy deals with the big questions in our lives, right? So, when we say questions, we have personal questions, we have our personal questions, and philosophical questions. It is very important for us to do what? Do self-reflection. Okay? So in doing self-reflection, you have to ask yourself. You have to talk to yourself. But not necessarily that somebody can hear you talking to yourself. They might judge you as insane, right? Okay, what I mean is you at least what have an int- introspection. You have to communicate with yourself, should reflect. Okay, that's very important to reflect. Okay, so of course, when you're asking to yourself a question, make sure that you're asking a philosophical question. Okay, because if you are only asking a personal question, then you're not doing philosophical reflection, di ba? So what are the examples of what we call personal questions? What shall I wear? What should I eat for breakfast? What else? So there are a lot of examples of personal questions that we normally ask ourselves. Okay, while philosophical questions are what? These are big questions in our lives. Okay, so so our question begins with an. So of course, sometimes when we do self-reflection, it begins with an ease. Okay, this feeling of inner discomfort comes from the experiences or experience of not being able to find immediate answers to our questions. So when we bravely and patiently wait for answers to these questions, we might find our questions giving birth to more questions, right? Often we find ourselves overwhelmed when asking too many questions that can't be immediately answered. So we then decide to divert our attention to relieve ourselves from the growing inner disturbance of these questions, right? So that when we say philosophical questions, these are big questions that you normally that you ask. Okay, just like what is the meaning of life? Is there life after death? What else? What is my purpose here on earth? Okay, am I really free if I think of what others say? If I don't think of what they say, will I really be happy? And so your question, what? Your question is giving birth to more questions. That is what we call philosophical questions. Because you're trying to figure out what? You're trying to find answers to your questions. Di ba? Pagka hindi mo nahanap yung questions, nagigive ng birth. Di ba? Laging dumadami yung questions mo. Am I right? So sometimes it is very important for us to what to ask ourselves philosophical questions. Okay, so going back to our for going back to the guide questions, right? Of course, what is the holistic perspective there? What is the partial perspective in the poem that we just read a while ago? So I assume that you have answered those questions while I'm discussing the lesson. So we were able to answer. Did anyone among the blind men give the correct answer? Of course, no, right? Nobody, no one. Okay, got the correct answer. Why? Because they were blind, right? So the number two, in the context of the elephant story, what do you think is holistic perspective? What is partial point of view? Of course, the blind man have rather have what? Partial point of view. Because they base their judgment, they base their conclusion on what they touch. That is what we call partial point of view in that situation. Right? So I assume that you have already answered number 3 and number 4 because I have already discussed that, right?